Hello, I'm Marianne Mashiri with BBC World News. Our top stories. With one day left to fight for the White House, Donald Trump slams a rigged system for protecting Hillary Clinton after she's cleared of criminal wrongdoing over her emails.
Hillary Clinton is guilty. She knows it. The FBI knows it. The people know it. And now it's up to the American people to deliver justice at the ballot box.
Leaving a cloud of toxic smoke in their wake, Islamic State fighters set 19 oil wells alight as they retreat from parts of Mosul.
Here on the edge of Qiara, you really get a sense of the scale of that cloud.
Protests in Hong Kong as China bans 2 pro-independence politicians from taking office. And we hear from the woman giving fashion dolls a facelift to make them more lifelike. Hello and welcome. Donald Trump has revived his claim that the US presidential election is being rigged in Hillary Clinton's favor after the FBI said it had found no evidence of criminality in the latest batch of emails linked to her. The director of the FBI, James Comey, said that a team of investigators had worked around the clock and had reviewed a large number of emails. Based on our review, he said, we have not changed our conclusions that we expressed in July with respect to Secretary Clinton. That conclusion was that she shouldn't be prosecuted. But Donald Trump insisted it would have been impossible for the FBI to review 650,000 emails in such a short space of time, saying it's a totally rigged system. In a moment, we'll look at how the latest twist in the race for the White House may affect the final hours of campaigning. But first, this report from our correspondent, Barbara Plett-Usher.
It's been a grueling and sometimes disheartening campaign. But with just hours to go before Election Day, some good news for Hillary Clinton.
Tonight, breaking news on the eve of this election, the
FBI lifted a cloud hanging over her presidential bid. It said a new inquiry into her emails had discovered no evidence to warrant criminal charges. Among Clinton aides, there was relief. They'd been blindsided when the FBI announced the review late last month.
We have seen Director Comey's latest letter to the Hill. We're glad to see that that he has found, as we were confident that he would, that he has confirmed the conclusions that he really reached in July, and we're glad that this matter is resolved.
So another extraordinary chapter in an election filled with them, but one that cut into Mrs. Clinton's momentum at a crucial time and galvanized her opponent.
This latest bombshell has given Hillary Clinton a morale boost. It's very good news for the people here. But coming so close to Election Day, it's not clear how or whether it will affect the vote.
Donald Trump had been using the inquiry as fresh ammunition to hammer Mrs. Clinton on her trustworthiness. He's shown no signs of tempering his attacks.
Right now, she is being protected by a rigged system. It's a totally rigged system. I've been saying it for a long time. You can't review 650,000 new emails in 8 days. You can't do it, folks.
Mr. Trump is crossing the country with frenetic energy, shuttling amongst the roughly dozen battleground states. He has to win virtually all of them to make it to the White House. And despite tightening polls, Hillary Clinton has retained her advantage, encouraged even before this latest reprieve by early voting patterns that look to be in her favor. But she's taking no chances, preparing for a grand finale with President Obama in one swing state and tacking on a midnight rally afterwards in another. Barbara Plett-Usher, BBC News, Cleveland, Ohio.
Well, the BBC's Peter Bowes is in Los Angeles. I asked him how much of the difference this FBI statement is going to make at this late stage in the campaign.
Well, with just 24 hours to go and the vast majority of people in this country seemingly fairly certain about who they're planning to vote for, it is difficult to see how this is going to make a big difference. There are not many people who will say, or at least acknowledge publicly, that they are still undecided. Nevertheless, there will be still a few sitting on the fence that may be swayed by this. Hillary Clinton has been exonerated. She herself actually hasn't commented on this yet. She's left it to her people to say that they're glad that this is over. And it seems as if on the final day she won't be saying much about it. It's essentially good news for her, but what she didn't want was the email saga in the headlines once again, because we've already seen that Donald Trump is determined to make hay out of this again, talking about the rigged system as he sees it. And it's difficult to say whether that is going to sway enough people, certainly in his favour, in those battleground states to win him the election. I think Donald Trump will still be focusing on the issues that he feels resonates with most people, like jobs and making America great again, as he puts it, especially in terms of competition with overseas countries, of China in particular, for business.
Absolutely. Economy very much in focus for Donald Trump and his campaign. The poll of polls, that's the median of all the polls put together, shows Hillary Clinton 1 percentage point ahead of Donald Trump. What do you think he has to do to claw back that lead?
Well, bear in mind that this isn't a popularity vote, so that poll of polls might be a little misleading. What he has to do is win in several of those key battleground states like Pennsylvania, Florida, perhaps North Carolina, perhaps Nevada as well. Those are the states that he has to win in to win the election, to become the next president. And he has made what some people see as quite unusual choices in the last 24 hours, going to places like Michigan, that are generally Democrat strongholds, not seen as a battleground state. He still feels as if he can go into those areas where Hillary Clinton is strong and make a difference at this late stage.
Well, for the latest and up-to-date information on the elections, do go to our website. It's bbc.com/US election, where you'll also find the latest polls in the race for the presidency. Right, let's move on now, because China has intervened to exclude 2 elected independence activists from Hong Kong's legislature. The move is the latest twist in China's efforts to silence the territory's democracy movement. In a ruling on Hong Kong's mini-constitution, China's parliament has said that those who deliberately misread their oaths cannot be sworn in again. Helia Chung reports from Hong Kong.
A ruling from the very top. China has disqualified 2 pro-independence activists from taking office. Yao Wai-ching and Sixtus Leung won elections earlier this year, but angered Beijing when they used their swearing-in ceremony to promote independence. Now, their oaths are being used as the basis to disqualify them. In a ruling on Hong Kong's law, China says that anyone who deliberately changes their oath or does not read it in a sincere way will be disqualified. China also wants to prevent legislators from advocating independence, something that it says would damage Hong Kong's stability and prosperity. Many in Hong Kong are angered by Beijing's intervention. Yesterday, about 10,000 people took to the streets, accusing China of undermining Hong Kong's judicial independence.
Beijing never bothered to promise one country, 2 systems to either Tibet or Xinjiang. They promised Hong Kong. This is supposed to be a city enjoying a high degree of autonomy.
China argues that the time for an interpretation is right and that activities advocating independence for Hong Kong will never be allowed. But with anger mounting in Hong Kong, many protesters will not be in the mood to listen. Helia Chung, BBC News, Hong Kong.
Time for a look at some of the other news this hour. 2 weeks of global climate talks begin today in Morocco. The aim is to agree on new rules to limit global warming and fill in details that were left undecided in the landmark Paris Climate Agreement signed last December. 20,000 participants of the world's nations are expected to attend. Nicaragua's President Daniel Ortega has been re-elected for a 3rd consecutive term. Electoral authorities said the left-wing former rebel leader secured more than 70% of the vote. The main opposition has questioned the legitimacy of the elections, saying the majority of voters had boycotted them. The first woman to serve as US Attorney General, Janet Reno, has died from complications of Parkinson's disease. She was 78. One of the best-known figures in Bill Clinton's administration, she authorized the deadly FBI raid on the compound of the Branch Davidian sect in Waco, Texas. Iraqi Kurdish forces are reported to be engaged in heavy fighting with Islamic State militants east of the city of Mosul. The Kurdish fighters launched the latest operation in the early hours of Monday in an attempt to recapture the town of Bashika from jihadists. Bashika, which is about 20 kilometers to the east of the city centre of Mosul, is believed to be deserted apart from Islamic State fighters. The fighting is all part of the operation to recapture Mosul, which has been underway for 3 weeks. On the southern edges of Mosul, retreating IS fighters set fire to oil wells, creating a toxic cloud of smoke that stretches for miles. From Khiara, south of Mosul, Quentin Somerville reports.
This is the Islamic State's toxic wake. In retreat, they're just as dangerous, leaving a poisoned land behind them. They've set on fire 19 different oil wells, and that has left an enormous toxic cloud across Mosul and beyond. And here on the edge of Khiara, you really get a sense of the scale of that cloud. Look beyond us, you can see those individual oil wells burning, but in fact, they've set alight 19 of those wells. The cloud stretches, we believe, an area the size even larger than Greater London, and that's causing untold suffering for people who are already recovering from the war here. But there may be worse yet to come, because the closer we get to the Islamic State in Mosul, they still have control of 6 oil fields, so they still have the capability to set more alight and to make the skies here even darker still. And here on the ground, everything is coated in this oily filth. It's in the air, it's in the water. You can feel it in your throat, you can feel it in your nose. And if you look over there on the horizon, that's Khiara power station. It too was attacked, and all of this filth here in this water supply, which is used for agriculture all across this area, well, it's been contaminated with this oil. And behind me is a flock of sheep. They're black sheep. They weren't meant to be black sheep, they're usually white. But the farmer was telling me his sheep have been dying as a result of this pollution. Their lungs have been infected, their livers have been infected too. It's bad enough for farm animals, but it's also having a terrible effect on young children and old people. Lung infections, they're suffering from bronchitis, and there isn't the medical support here because this is still an active war zone to help them recover. This filthy cloud stretches for miles, and the Iraqi government needs to make it a priority to put these oil well fires out. Quentin Somerville, BBC News, south of Mosul.
Do stay with us here on BBC World News, because still to come, Too Smoggy for School will be live in Delhi, where pollution has also shut building sites for days.
The Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, the architect of the Middle East peace process, has been assassinated. A 27-year-old Jewish man has been arrested, and an extremist Jewish organisation has claimed responsibility for the killing.
At polling booths throughout the country, they voted on a historic day for Australia. As the results came in, it was clear the monarchy would survive.
Of the American hostages, there was no sign. They are being held somewhere inside the compound, and student leaders have threatened that should the Americans attempt rescue, they will all die.
This mission has surpassed all expectations. Voyager 1 is now the most distant man-made object anywhere in the universe, and it just seems to keep on going.
Tonight we proved once more that the true strength of our nation comes not from the might of our arms or the scale of our wealth, but from the enduring power of our ideals.
This is BBC World News. I'm Mariam Mashiri, and these are the latest headlines. As we enter the final day of campaigning for the White House, Donald Trump slams a rigged system for protecting Hillary Clinton after she's cleared of criminal wrongdoing over her emails. A cloud of toxic smoke hangs over parts of Mosul as Islamic State fighters set alight 19 oil wells in their retreat. Time for some business news. Jamie is here. And Jamie, a trip to India for Theresa May, the UK Prime Minister.
Yes, a lot of attention on this. The visit to British Prime Minister Theresa May to India. The 3-day visit is seen as a very important sign of how the UK is going to be able to strike new trade deals once it's left the EU. India is one of the world's largest and fastest growing economies, obviously, and one of the UK's oldest trading partners. But how easy is it going to be for British companies to tap into the enormous Indian market? Many of them there already, but trade between the UK and India is currently worth $20.6 billion a year. Amongst the UK's top exports to India, we've got Triumph motorbikes, we've got Scotch whisky, of course, and Costa Coffee, and many others. But meanwhile, Indian firms also own giant British brands like Thai Food Tea, and remember, Jaguar cars as well. They employ over 100,000 people in the UK. Now, the UK government would like more access to India. Obviously, it's a huge market, but specifically for the City of London's banks and the insurance companies. They are the UK's most valuable export earners. But the Indian government wants to protect its financial sector from foreign competition. It's very nervous because it's younger, as it were, than the British financial system, and it feels is more vulnerable to competition. Whatever happens, there's not going to be any trade deals signed on this visit. Those agreements can only be made once the UK formally leaves the EU. HSBC's third quarter profits, they've fallen pretty sharply after it made a loss from the sale of its Brazilian unit. Pre-tax profits at Europe's largest bank dropped to $843 million. That's down from $6.1 billion in the same period a year ago. HSBC took a $1.7 billion loss on the sale of that unit, but it also pointed to customer compensation in America, currency moves, all that added to a fall in profits. HSBC, of course, is the last of the UK's major banks to report quarterly results after Lloyds, RBS and Barclays posted slightly better than expected profits for the third quarter. On those markets, let me just take you over there. Quite a sharp gain. It's a lot to do with the, not to do with the euro against dollar, but the pound against dollar. Pound is falling back again, and we're seeing the FTSE rise because of big international companies like HSBC, and because they're doing better, because they're making their money in dollars, not in pounds. That's business. Back to you.
Rather dollars than pounds these days, huh, Jamie? Thank you very much indeed. High levels of air pollution that prompted the closure of schools across India's capital has led to similar measures in neighbouring cities. For more than a week, Delhi has been filled with a thick haze that has made people's eyes sting and their throats sore. Now, officials in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh say they expect the acrid smog to blanket the state within days. Well, let's go to get the latest now from Sanjoy Majumdar, who is in Delhi for us. And Sanjoy, it's quite usual, isn't it, around the period of Diwali for there to be more smog and more smoke around certain cities in India, but this really is a lot worse than that, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. It's almost a week since that festival ended, and we've had some really bad days, prompting the government to bring in emergency measures overnight. And you can see a bit of that effect taking place now. It's a little clearer today at this time than it has been for several days. Certainly it was quite murky this morning. Now what's happened is that the government at the moment has asked factories to stop functioning. One of the city's main power plants has been shut down. Construction work has been shut. Schools have been closed for the next 3 days. They've started sprinkling water on the streets to let the dust settle. And they've also started vacuum cleaning some of the streets. All of this to tackle what's clearly the worst smog that Delhi has experienced. We're now being told it's the worst in 17 years. Now, what's causing it? A number of different factors. Vehicular pollution, of course. Diwali, which is celebrated with the bursting of firecrackers. One of the key reasons has been the burning of crops, rice fields, wheat fields in the countryside surrounding Delhi. And the reason they do it is once the harvest is ended, the farmers burn their crop, or what remains of it, the stubble, to clear it for the next cycle of crops to take place. And that's what has really affected the situation in Delhi and in those places you mentioned this year.
Well, I can see that, as you mentioned, things look like they are slightly better, because we have been seeing incredible photos and pictures of very thick smog. There must be a lot of anger amongst Indians about what's had to happen to get to this point.
Yes, that's right, because even though it looks slightly better, let me tell you that if you measure it, if you measure the tiny particles, which are really dangerous because they get into your lungs, the levels are still much, much higher than is considered safe, 3 times, 4 times more in many parts of the city. And that's really why people are angry, because they say this happens every year. Everyone knew this was going to happen in other countries around the world. They'd have declared an emergency. It's just taken the government here way too long.
OK, Sandra, good to get that from you. Thank you very much indeed. Pressure is growing on Myanmar's de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi to investigate claims that the army has been abusing Muslim civilians. 4 weeks ago, militants from the Rohingya Muslim minority killed 9 policemen in attacks near the border with Bangladesh. Well, since then, the army has shut down the area and there have been reports of extrajudicial killings and the rape of Rohingya women. Jonah Fisher sent this report.
Northern Rakhine State is off-limits to Western journalists. The Burmese military doesn't want us looking into claims that its soldiers have been killing and raping Muslim civilians. So we sent someone in to film secretly. This is the group that triggered the latest violence. Made up of what appeared to be Muslims from the Rohingya minority, they killed 9 policemen before fleeing with guns and ammunition. Rohingya areas were quickly sealed and what's been called a clearance operation began. Soldiers moved into this village on the 10th of October. Most people fled, but for some reason, these 2 brothers, aged 13 and 18, stayed in their home.
The soldiers pointed the gun at them, and then we took out documents that showed that they're still at school. They didn't accept that and said they are terrorists that have to be killed.
We were shown where the boys were shot and their bodies dumped, along with the 3rd man.
The soldiers took off the boys' shirts and stole their money. Then they packed their bodies in plastic and took them in a truck. I still don't know where they are now.
There have been scores of stories just like this that we've been prevented from verifying. At least 30, possibly as many as 100 Rohingya have died, and dozens of women claim to have been raped by soldiers. There has already been one investigation into the violence, led by this man from the local parliament. A Buddhist nationalist, he told me the Rohingya had burnt down their own houses and said there was no way the soldiers could have raped the women.
Why not?
They are very dirty.
What do you mean by that?
The Bengali or Rohingya women have a very low standard of living and poor hygiene. They're not attractive, so neither the local Buddhist men or the soldiers are interested in them. Few Burmese have a kind word to say about the Rohingya. So, a year after winning a historic election, where's Myanmar's de facto leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, on all of this? Well, the answer's in India, and last week in Japan, but not in Rakhine State, and certainly not demanding an independent investigation.
The army isn't under the control of Ms. Suu Kyi, but it's striking how little concern this icon of democracy appears to have, both for the plight of the Rohingya people and the abuses being committed by the Burmese military.
There are 2 ways of looking at this. Ms. Suu Kyi is weak and knows she can do nothing about Rakhine, or she thinks her relationship with the army and power is more important than trying to tackle abuses against an unloved minority.
Now, we're used to seeing children's dolls with heavy makeup and skimpy outfits, but one woman here in the UK is giving them a very different kind of makeover.
She calls it a make-under, not a makeover. Emma Cayley buys second-hand dolls in charity shops. She removes their painted faces and gives them a new look.
I suppose I'm transforming the fashion dolls, making them look more natural, more innocent.
Emma says she is rescuing the dolls from this to this. She had the idea when her 6-year-old daughter started playing with toys that Emma thought gave the wrong message about body image and diversity.
I'd rather that she played with dolls that look more like her, and that she wasn't kind of forced to grow old too quickly.
But what do children think of the toys? We went to this primary school in Exeter with some of the original dolls and some of Emma's made-under versions.
I don't think this is actually healthy for her, and she's just trying to make herself comfortable and happy in how she is, so This, I don't really like it.
Most of the kids preferred Emma's more natural-looking dolls.
They still look beautiful without makeup on. She's wearing like a normal dress, and then that dress is a bit like fashion-y, and like I would never see that in a shop.
Girls would normally try to base themselves on this one, like saying, oh, I want to look like that one day, but when sometimes really you look better without too much makeup, but this one is like a normal girl.
It's important for Barbies to look different.
Toy companies like Mattel say they've already made changes to make their products more representative.
One is taller than original Barbie, one is more petite, and one is curvier.
Earlier this year, new types of Barbie were introduced, with a wider range of body shapes, skin tones and outfits.
I applaud what they've done. I think it's great, but I do think it could go further.
How much further would you like it to go?
You know, perhaps producing dolls with which might be quite challenging to look at. So perhaps dolls with some kind of facial disfigurement, that sort of thing.
John Kay reporting there. That's all we have time for here in BBC World News. Plenty more to come throughout the day, but from me and the team here in the London studio, bye-bye. Thanks for watching.
Hello there. We've seen some awful weather across the Mediterranean through the weekend, and there's not much improvement in the story. It stays pretty stormy. One area of low pressure moves away and takes the storms across towards the Balkans, but you can see another one moving out of Tunisia and Libya, and that will push towards central and southern Italy as well. It's cold across parts of Poland, up into Russia, and here we can see some snow with temperatures at around 1 degree into Moscow. And yes, it's going to be rain really as we move further south into the Ukraine. Drier, settled weather conditions across the Balkans and certainly into northern Italy in comparison to recently, but make the most of it because there's more wet weather to come, particularly through central and southern Italy. Greece, some of the Greek Isles, fine and settled and still pleasant enough with temperatures perhaps into the low 20s. So the story into Tuesday, as you can see, further unsettled weather moving across the Mediterranean, affecting southern Italy. We'll have some wet and windy weather pushing into the British Isles, and eventually that will move its way into France as well. And the temperatures are disappointing. So we'll see some rain into Paris through the middle of the week, some of it quite heavy. Madrid and Rome will see the blue sky and sunshine, and here a little quieter. Elsewhere further east, it's the cold that's the talking point in Moscow. There'll be further snow likely through Thursday. Take care.